Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to do some color toning to an image today, so you can see a little bit what I do to some backgrounds. This is a little purple finch that I saw at Francis Beidler Forest the other day. That is up near Charleston. It is a fantastic place to go if you are in the Charleston area. Pop in there. It's an Audubon sanctuary. It's got a beautiful boardwalk and a fantastic place to see all kinds of beautiful wildlife. So we're going to start, this was my original, and we got to this point. And if you want to see these settings here, you can see we worked just some contrast, brought up some shadows, whites, blacks, added some texture. And then no denoising on this image, but did bring up a little bit of sharpness, and then just use the manual, the luminance slider down below here to kind of just get a start on smoothing out that backdrop. So today's quick lesson is more about the color toning here. So I'm gonna bring this out just a little bit. Not that much, huh? All right. Now, I think I want to bring some of these tones into the backdrop. So I'm not going to use any of the neat tools down here, but I am going to use some simple sliders. We're going to take a mask and choose the background. And you can see it's grabbing some elements that we don't want it to, so we're going to subtract subject, and that does a little better for us. Now I'm just going to come down here and use temperature and tint for this purpose. I want this to be subtle. So I'm going to bring up the temperature here with some gold. It'll warm it up. Now pay attention here. We're going to have to come back in and take care of that backdrop that isn't caught by our mask. And then I'm just going to drag in some of this magenta tone as well. All right. Now what I like to do is find the color tone that I want, and now I'm going to play with saturation. So don't worry about bringing these up or down too much. You know, you could really, if you want the color to be more rich, bring the sliders over. Now for my eye, this is more than I want to do here. But then what I can do is just work the saturation back down. And you can see we've still got a more of a dark tone. Now if we bring saturation back to kind of level there, and you can do this way as well. But our tones are not going to be quite as rich. Even, you know, we can bring in saturation. So depending on how much of that color you want in the backdrop. Now another way we can work that out a little bit as well is by adding in, I watch out the whites here. There is a light source there. So in a way, I think sometimes it's nice to exploit that. And then I think we may, rather than again working exposure, because we're affecting the whole image, I think what we'll do is shortly here, we'll bring in a mask to tone this down, but I'm going to tone it with color. So let's just go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to do that with a linear gradient and just kind of pull it into that light source. And I'm just going to bring up a little bit of warmth for that light source, as opposed to just trying to tone out the whiteness of it with whites or highlights. So I've given it a little bit of color, and then let's see what happens when we bring down our highlights. All right. So sort of play with how you want this to look, right? Here's our whites that are sort of blown out there. We don't want that, but we also don't want to lose the fact that that's a light source. So sometimes I'll have an idea and I'll think, oh, this is going to be great. And sometimes it is. But now that I look at this, I'm like, that's not really what I wanted. So now if you're undecided, just take your mask and hide it. Okay. And you can also, this will let you see what you've done and maybe what you want to do or leave out. So I don't really like the way that turned out. So I'm just going to get rid of it. All right, and we're going to go back to working this section here. All right, now I'm going to leave that and stew on that for a little bit. But what I do want to do is come in to this section and add this toning to this area. So I'm going to go ahead and come over here. I'm going to come in at 200% so we can get right in there. And we'll go ahead and show the overlay. And I'm going to add a brush. And I'm on a pretty high feather here. So I'm going to bring that down just a little bit. It'll help to fill our area in a little more densely. And I'm just going to drag it in here. Now, surprisingly, a lot of times you don't need to be incredibly specific here or, tight up against. Sometimes you do, but I think in an image like this, you're going to be fine just because this image has so many different lights and darks. We just don't want this large section to have no color tone to it when we've toned the back. So I'm going to come back out here. I'm going to hit return to get rid of my mask. And now you can see that this area just isn't popping quite as much. All right, now one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with another brush. And in order to tone out some of this brightness, let's see if we can't do it with a little bit of clarity. I'll try that first. Clarity tends to lend some contrast. And again, you can just play with your mask. So bringing down the clarity, you can see we've got sort of that white spot. So clarity is actually going to cover some of that for us. And then you can also look at dehazing if we want to bring back any of that light and maybe see if we can make one of those bokeh balls pop. But that just took away some of that white, but yet still leaves the notion of a light source up top. Now with some images, you can go ahead and bring in a linear gradient and just pull it here, and you can make this whole area much lighter and brighter, and really make the feel of a ray of light coming this way if you want to. Now, one thing that's popping to me are these two sections here, and this is another place where clarity might actually help us out. So I'm going to go ahead and hit my K brush and then come down here. And actually, I'm going to try to employ a couple of things. I'm going to pull clarity down just a little bit and maybe pull down dehaze. And then just let's see if we can go in and just touch on these dark spots and see if that lightens them up a bit for us. And again, this background is I want to say easy, but it's this type of background gives us some leeway to play because it's so modeled. There's so much going on that we can really, like here, see how those dark areas, we just don't want them to jump out quite as much. Just like a white spot in an image can jump out at us and detract from the subject, so can dark spots. So we could bring up the texture. Texture is probably not going to make a difference here. We're not really affecting contrast like the others. All right. And then we can even just play a little more with the dehaze and make those even less dark. All right. And then I think finally I'm just going to touch back on our bird. So I thought I had a bird one already. All right, so we're going to create a mask. We're going to grab our subject. Okay, now you can see this section is covered, but I think what we're gonna do isn't going to impact it much, but we'll keep an eye on it. But I do want to just bring the bird up, I think, so, and you can see this is being affected, right? So I'm gonna subtract, and we're just gonna do that right now and see if we can't just bring that back to the tone of the background. There we go. All right, so now we'll come back to our subject. And I just want to bring that up a little, and then maybe some contrast. I just want to brighten our bird. And then I may just add a little bit of warmth. So maybe adding some of those tones that we added to the backdrop. We're really not taking away from the truth of the bird. This is, and again, when we talk about artful photography, and we're taking some liberties, but for the most part, always try to stay true to what that bird looked like. Now, there's so many other things we could do here. I'm gonna end on this note. You could go in here and try to lift this leaf a little bit with a little bit of exposure, or lift whites here, just maybe to make the fact that it's munching on a leaf. Make sure you go in and I've already touched on the eye here, but draw a little mask in for your eye. And I always just bring the exposure up a little bit there. And then maybe just get rid of that little nubbin there that's coming off of that branch. And then don't forget, when you're at a place here, you can snapshot. So I might say, video here, just to know why I created this one. So real quickly, here was our original. And then we came to this point. And then what we just worked on, here's our video final. Okay, now here are a couple of other versions, a little darker. Now this one is a little more high key. So our video here, and this is a little, now again, one of the reasons I like to stop at certain stages too, you can really see where you were to where you are and decide if you like the amount of change that you have put into an image. So a lot of times I'll do this and then I actually may walk away, work on something else, and then come back. So even just right now for this video purpose, coming through here, I'm like, maybe that's just a little too pink for me right now. It's a little too peachy toned. So I may just go ahead and overall bring down some saturation here. Now this is another thing to, play with both of these guys. I mean, you can come, and there's times that landscapes, there's some images you can make really artful by playing with vibrance and saturation in the right places. But we can maybe just we can still have that light pinky tone there, and again, you can even make this a little higher key. Just keep working it until your eye is happy. But I hope that gives you some idea as to how we can go from an original to where we didn't have a lot of color in the backdrop, to playing with your tones and just make them maybe a little more pleasing to the eye and give the scene just a little more life than it actually had in reality.